Apologies in advance for the voice. I am under the weather. So Zack Snyder teases Batman The Dark Knight Returns. Well, he's been teasing it even before he did Man of Steel. You know, he started teasing it after he did Watchmen. And, Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns is basically his preferred vision of superheroes. So Zack Snyder dropped another image stirring speculation, and this time it points directly at Batman. So yes, he's been teasing a lot of imagery on his Instagram, a lot of DCEU stuff. So Henry Cavill's Superman, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, Ben Affleck's Batman, on and on, Aquaman, so on. Now, to be fair, he's teased a lot of images from his other movies, 300, couple from Sucker Punch, stuff like that. But the DCEU images greatly outnumber those. So the suspicion was, is there some talks about him returning to DC? One of the ones I thought was probably more likely is Dark Knight Returns. That he could absolutely do that. Would he cast Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill as Batman and Superman in that film? Maybe, but I mean, since he borrowed a lot from Dark Knight Returns in Batman versus Superman, I don't know. And there again, I don't know that certainly that Cavill has always wanted a solo Superman film to follow up on Man of Steel. If he doesn't get that out of any deal, he might not be interested in doing it. You have to recast it for this film. So, but it would be cool if he could do that. I've always thought that the best thing about, he probably should have just done a full-on adaptation of Dark Knight Returns instead of Batman versus Superman, and then the rest of the DCEU would be set in the past from that movie, and they could have gone with that. But anyway, so he showed a photo of his workbench filled with pottery jars, but eagle-eyed fans quickly spotted something tucked into the corner, a copy of Frank Miller's iconic graphic novel, The Dark Knight Returns. So there's the image, there's the pottery. He's into making pottery. And oh no, look what's here. It just happens to be there. That's where he keeps his Batman comics, in his pottery studio. Yeah. So, and he's teased stuff like this for quite leading up throughout the release, the Snyder Cut, especially on Vero. He would do that a lot, and then of course we know, it bore fruit. The Snyder Cut was eventually released. So Snyder has long expressed interest in adapting the story in a comic-accurate way. With recent buzz around Netflix's acquisition of Warner Bros. Discovery, some fans are wondering if this tease is more than just a coincidence. Sources tell us that Snyder wants Ben Affleck back as Batman, and that Affleck is open to returning under the right circumstances. Now, a Zack Snyder directed film, I think Ben Affleck would return to that. Anything else, probably not. By all accounts, he really does have a very good relationship with Zack Snyder. So, yeah. But as far as Netflix goes, early on, there was people clamoring for Warner Bros. To sell the Snyderverse to Netflix, and they would produce their separate DC operation there with Snyderverse movies. Because Snyder was over at Netflix doing his Army of the Dead and Rebel Moon. Those were terrible. Those were terrible films. His Twilight of the Gods was the most interesting of the ones he did. So I don't know that the relationship with Netflix is still there. So what about if Paramount wins out on this bidding war over Warner Brothers? Well, there's some indication that maybe there's interest there. But ultimately, I mean, pursuing the completion of the Justice League story that he had mapped out, a Batman Dark Knight Returns film seems more likely. It's a one film, and maybe it has Ben Affleck in it, but it wouldn't necessarily be the same thing as the DCEU Batman. Anyway, we're also hearing Snyder's recent wave of Justice League era behind-the-scenes images is more than just nostalgia, as he's reportedly testing fan response, which has been overwhelmingly positive. Could a live-action Dark Knight Returns be next on Snyder's list at Netflix? Ben Affleck's new movie with Matt Damon, The Rip, happens to be at Netflix. Affleck also has the Batsuit fully on display at their studio. Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. If Paramount happens to nab WBD, we're told the Snyderverse could be fully back in play. So this is what Cosmic Book News claims they're hearing. That they said, no, we would want to see the full-on Snyderverse come back. So the Justice League films would be completed and all that. Back in December of 2023, Zack did say he would end his superhero career with The Dark Knight Returns. He says, if you look at Watchmen, where Alan Moore took like basically a iconographic characters that you could superimpose over a lot of, if Night Owl was Batman. Well, he wasn't. Night Owl was Blue Beetle. So he was, I know he has more of the look of a Batman suit, but yeah. Although there is something to argue about Blue Beetle, as Steve Ditko imagined him, was sort of a mix of Spider-Man and Batman. So, yeah, there's some Batman in there. Dr. Manhattan is Superman. That's a little more, even though Dr. Manhattan is based on Captain Atom. But, yeah, he's the only character with superpowers. And he's far removed from humanity and all that. You can make all these different sorts of archetypical, however you want to say it, hero analysis over the top of those stories. At the time. Now, to continue to think about Dark Knight Returns, it is literally Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman, so he's throwing Wonder Woman into it. She was not in Dark Knight Returns. She did show up in Dark Knight Strikes Again, which is nowhere near as good as Dark Knight Returns. But I suppose for the purposes of a movie, you could weave in a little bit of that just to include the other Justice League members. But, and if you're going to make it integrated into the DCEU, well, maybe that could be a thing. I don't know. But anyway, the deconstruction is so obvious and so palpable. For me, it was like comics grew up in a single moment. When I read that book, I was completely laid bare. Everything I thought about superheroes. For me, it's the greatest comic book ever written. If I could do that, then I will have done Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns, and I would be pretty much done with superheroes. Well, yeah, that's kind of like what Dark Knight and Watchmen are is sort of the conclusion, even though Frank Miller and Alan Moore still loved superheroes and went on to write them anyway. And really, a lot of Alan Moore's later works was kind of a rejection of the deconstruction mode. He did that at the time because it was an approach to the lore, but it wasn't meant to be. That's the only way you tell superheroes, and a lot of them got the wrong idea that the superheroes had to be, adult-oriented, overly adult, a lot of sex and violence and stuff like that, especially the violence. And that's not exactly, that was not the intent of the book, but, it's what happened. And deconstructionism has been played out. Now, an adaptation of, a classic book like Dark Knight Returns, fine. And seeing as he sees this would be my last superhero movie, then my guess is you have to table it if you get a chance to do your Justice League sequels. If they could get a project going, and I think for poor Henry Cavill, who got jerked around by Warner Brothers so many times, and Ben Affleck as well, do the two of them get to do their solo movies of their characters? And you make a full-on package deal, and you get Zack Snyder gets 3 movies. He gets Justice League 2 and 3, and he gets Dark Knight Returns. You have Man of Steel 2, whatever they want to call it, and then Ben Affleck's Batman film, Batman versus Deathstroke, and that becomes the complete maybe. You know, time permitting and whatnot, a Gal Gadot Wonder Woman 3 to make everyone forget about Wonder Woman 84. Then there you go. It's a nice little package. It's a lot of films, though. The idea of just, hey, let's just go for Dark Knight Returns. And that would be the easier thing to do. And you include probably just some glorified cameos of any of the other characters like Wonder Woman. Whereas the movie's a Batman movie. But the only other main superhero character is Superman in it. So then you could do that. But what if it's a smash hit? What if it's just people can't stop talking about it? And it's like, hey, Zach, you want to continue your Justice League films? And so, I mean, do you do it in a way that you'd have to craft the Dark Knight Returns in such a way that still fits, you know? Well, before Dark Knight Returns, this happened, I guess. I don't know. So, but yeah, a Dark Knight Returns film. That one, whether full live action or animated, or they already done an animated film, so it's got to be a live action. That seems more likely, you know. But, you know, stranger things have happened, so not just the show, but stranger things overall, tee-hee, is possible. So, you know, as with all things, we'll see.